The Joker meets his dad, and this is part 2, really the conclusion of Joker's new origin. So what this does here is this picks up with Daniel. Now Daniel is kind of like the self-proclaimed smartest man in the world, and in a lot of ways he kind of is, right? He's technically a psychologist, but he's the guy that trained Batman in Batman the Knight. Basically the story that taught him that like pain is a relative thing, how to shut that off, seize control of his emotions, all the things that made Batman into Batman. The big difference here is that it was really almost like Daniel was a psychopath and trying to turn Batman into a psychopath, whereas with the Joker he sees a more perfected version of what he can create. And so as the two of them talk, Daniel sort of muses here, right? He says he's a wild beast. He needs to run off on his own before he comes back to me, but he will. It's too tempting for the man who is on the edge of perfection. He's so close, and I can cure the only thing holding him back: his fear of the man I know deeply, Bruce Wayne, the Batman, the man I trained. And so you get this idea where he says, now I've found your opposite, and once I've cured him, expanded his mind, he'll be unstoppable. And in fact, that's really what happens here, because what you do is you pick up with the Joker when he finally sits down with Daniel, when he actually does come back. And in a lot of ways, it was kind of what Daniel was expecting, but he wasn't really sure what to get from the Joker, because the reality here is that when they first met, it was the iconic scene from The Killing Joke, where the Joker runs down to the reservoir at its chemical plant, he looks down into the water and he sees his face is all bleached and everything, all that kind of stuff, and just now learning what he actually looks like. But unlike the original Killing Joke, where that moment is what broke his mind, instead, Daniel's gonna turn him into the Joker that we're the most familiar with. And that's why when the Joker shows up here and starts talking to him, he asks like, why are you doing this? Why make me whole? The response of Daniel is, I'm a scientist of human behavior. Batman wrongly thinks he can be a force for order. I'm interested in what happens when he meets an equal force for chaos. And so that's when it's kind of like, okay, cool. And the response to Daniel is, we can start immediately, because he knows that if he were to turn the Joker down, the Joker would probably kill him. He just seems to be that unstable. And so what you get is this kind of series of events that Daniel puts the Joker through to teach him all of this. He says, I teach him what I taught Bruce, how pain is in the mind and can be turned off with enough training, how he does it in record time, but I suspect he doesn't care about such things. I think he likes the pain, so I push him deeper. I teach him to eradicate fear, to control any human emotions he may have. When I'm not training him, I'm dissecting him, mentally of course, right? And he says, a stunning mind on the edge of greatness. Everything he says to me is a lie, but I look past the lies at his truth. I once said to Bruce that nothing matters and everything matters, that existence is a simultaneous cosmic trick, a cosmic joke. This man before me is the physical manifestation of that. I teach him everything. Now, this is really where everything that's happened in the Batman comics up to this point comes to a head. And for those of you guys who aren't really familiar with that, we have a link to the playlist at the end of this video that you could check out. But I'm talking about the introduction of Zur-En-Arrh. Zur-En-Arrh was a concept that was introduced way back in like the day, right? 1950s, 1960s Batman. That was almost kind of like a comedic concept. In more recent years, it's been restructured to basically be a different personality of Batman. The personality that comes to bear when Batman needs to do the things that Bruce Wayne isn't ready to do, to become darker, to become more violent, almost kind of like his own version of the Joker, but less insane. But we never really knew where that came from. It was simply just potentially a manifestation of a personality that Bruce may or may not have had, and it was just kind of there one day. Daniel not only has this version for himself, but he introduces it to the Joker. But this shows us how crazy and how deep the Joker goes, and actually consolidates a bunch of stuff. Because what Daniel does is he gives in to his darker personality, his equivalent of Zur-En-Arrh. And where Joker doesn't initially know what to make of it, the response of Daniel is gone, right? My name is Zar-M-Zed. I am a fragment of Daniel, put aside for when he needs me, when he needs my anger. See, this is what we can teach you, what will truly make you great. Personalities nestled within, to be used and focused when you need them. Men like you, me, and Batman, we make ourselves. Are you ready to make yourself into anything you desire? Now, here's the beauty behind all of this. Over the years in DC Comics, you guys have noticed there have been quote-unquote different versions of the Joker. And in fact, in more recent years, the story 3 Jokers by Jeff Johns tried to reconcile that by making like 3 physical versions of the Joker. This is fixing all of that. Different Jokers have appeared in different eras. The old Steve Englehart Joker was basically the Joker you saw in Batman the Animated Series. New 52 Joker was far more sadistic and way more extreme. And so with these differing personalities, this is what the Joker is taught, right? We're told he exceeds Bruce immediately, seeing the potential of the backups. The first is the clown, laughter and devilish bursting forth, an imp with a demon side, right? That's Batman the Animated Series Joker, at least in terms of personality. The second is simply that demon. I don't believe in heaven or hell, but if I did, I'd think this man has existed for millennia, tormenting humanity in service of something greater. This is your just dark, sadistic, evil version of Joker, right? And he says the third is calm, like a black ocean at night. And like that ocean, all that waits for you is cold death, right? That's the focused Joker, the one you really don't want to mess with. And so Daniel kind of looks at this and says, for the first time in my life, I'm finally awestruck. And so it's this moment where it's just kind of like, these are where these differing versions of the Joker came from. And so following this whole experience of Joker unlocking these different versions of himself, what Daniel says is he says, I've helped him push his mind as far as it can go. He hasn't spoken in over 24 hours. I wanted to see the effects of unleashing a brain that's both brilliant and broken. Bruce's mind was brilliant, but it was his heart that was broken. I thought this man could be his equal, his counter, but is there a step beyond madness, a place where someone does not come back from? And that's the fear of the Joker. The idea is that Daniel pushed him too far, or he was messing with something that he wasn't fully prepared for. What happens when you encounter a human being that gives in to their animal side, to their darker side, their sadistic side? They lose that human element, right? That's gone forever. Because the funny thing is that the Joker does kind of represent that ideology. Life does not in and of itself have an inherent purpose, unless you believe in the biological imperative of people to procreate. But assuming that we're not governed by instinct and that we're sentient and capable of making rational decisions, life has no real inherent meaning or purpose. It's just whatever purpose we give to it. And because there is no just guaranteed higher power structure out there for everything, life is whatever you want it to be. And for a person like Joker, he represents that very concept, that there is no greater plan, there is no greater purpose. There's just a series of moments, and whatever happens in those moments happens, right? Absolute chaos. And so it's fascinating because the Joker himself ends up looking at Daniel and he says, you know, you're the one who made Batman. You made him into what he is. You turned Bruce from a guy who was struggling with the death of his parents into a razor sharp blade that was focused, that could hone himself and become the person that I am so terrified of. And he says, but you also created me. I am this person that I am now because of you. So in effect, you are our father. You created us, you made us into who we are. But this is when the Joker transitions, because up until this moment, Batman terrified him, right? Because the Joker has been more human than inhuman. Now it's reversed, right? The Joker is more inhuman than human. He fears nothing. All he wants to do is just spread chaos and madness or whatever scheme makes sense to himself at that particular point in time. And in doing so, he murders Daniel on the spot, just absolutely kills this guy. And that's when he becomes the crazy sadistic Joker. He puts on the whole suit and everything. Now, we get to see the first scheme of this new Joker, the first real campaign that he actually engaged in. And a lot of this kind of involves what was going on with Jim Gordon at the time that all this was happening, which is to say, Jim Gordon was basically a relatively newer cop. He basically rooted out corruption pretty effectively within the Gotham City Police Department. Wasn't really able to do anything about it, but he kind of figured out who was crooked and who was not. The crazy thing is you have guys like Manny Gabri, you have guys like Commissioner McLeod, but then you also have have the Red Hood gang, the gang that Joker was originally the leader of. But in the absence of the Joker and it all basically going belly up, him seemingly believed to have been dead, only to actually come back but then become the Joker, now you basically have McCloud, right? The Red Hood gang is in effect half the members of the Gotham Police Department. And so what happens is you pick up with this clown named Mr. Grimaldi, right, who's just kind of there in the police station, and he's talking to the cops, talking about how he was tormented by some rich kids right over on the upper side of town. And he just kind of seems innocuous more than anything else. While that goes on, you have like these other cops, right? Manny Gabri, who kind of comes in. The guy's crooked as a politician, but comes in talking about some massive drug bust that they just got, right? And how it's really going to put them on the map and get them a pay raise and all that kind of stuff. When they get to the evidence locker, they take out the evidence cop, they start putting on all their different masks after the cameras are shut off, and Jim Gordon, realizing the cameras are turned off, realizes that the Red Hood gang is hitting Gotham's precinct. But the only way the Red Hood gang could hit the precinct is if they were let in by cops, which is just the most ridiculous thing ever, or if they were cops, which is the most sensible thing ever. And that's when Gordon figures out half the Gotham Police Department, right? These crooked cops, they're the Red Hood gang, and it's a smart move. What better way to make yourself ultra rich, right, by being a corrupt cop and being a gang member as a corrupt cop operating out there? Because the very things that you quote unquote bust the gang for and bring back to the evidence locker are things that you can just take with you. You can just leave, right? Just literally make yourself wealthy off of all these things. But while all that's going on, you have the clown that's there. Of course, you guys have figured out by now, it's obviously the Joker, right? But this guy's just kind of there holding some balloons and talking. And this is where things get cool, because what happens is Commissioner McCloud ends up pulling out a drawer, right, that has his gun with it because things are going sideways pretty fast, but he's also orchestrated all of this. So he's the one that's kind of helping to make the escape and everything. And there's a note from Batman that says, "I know everything that you've done," because he does. Batman figured it all out pretty fast, much quicker than Jim Gordon would have figured it out. And Batman's kind of on his way there. But the thing about this is it all kind of comes down to Gordon, but then it comes down to the Joker. Because what happens here is that while everything's going sideways with the cops, the Joker lets go of the balloons. And when he does, this kind of fuse starts to light, and all these balloons end up just exploding, which does offer a method of distraction, but it allows Jim Gordon to get the upper hand on Commissioner McCloud. But then the Joker goes after everybody else, right? All the other cops. And where these cops, as the Red Hood gang, are just kind of like, did something explode above us? Like, what's going on here? The Joker just says, oh, upstairs is a veritable toy box, otherwise known as the Armory. And this guy's standing there with a flashbang and a Kalashnikov, which may be one of the most horrifying things for us to see from the Joker. Now, ultimately, the fight between Commissioner Gordon and McCloud just kind of leads out to where the rest of the cops are, who were basically good cops. The cameras were turned back on, and so Commissioner McCloud ends up inadvertently confessing in front of, like, God and everybody, right? Video evidence that proves that he's a crooked cop. But for all the other cops who basically make their escape under the guise as the Red Hood gang, the Joker ends up catching up to them, and the Joker takes them out. Now, the kicker behind this is he doesn't kill him, right? What he does is he takes them away, because you pick up with Manny, who's in this room surrounded by mirrors. And the Joker just says, "Hello, Manny. Good news. My antidote worked. The bad news? I just didn't have time to give it to the rest of your crew." And he says, "Thanks again for hand delivering my product to the precinct." Because what had happened here is that Manny and his guys were quote unquote tipped off about a big drug bust. And when they got there, that's the drug bust that they brought into the precinct. They unwittingly brought in what was in effect a very early variant of the Joker toxin. And so as Manny is making his way through these corridors, he ends up coming across Red Hood 22, because the original Red Hood gang, they were given numbers. They were never given names. It was a great way to keep everything secret. But also 22 was the guy who found the Joker after he became the Joker. And because the Joker doesn't keep friends, just people to experiment on or torment, it was only a matter of time before he took this guy out. He did exactly that, right? Exposed number 22, also known as Brian, to the original Joker toxin, the first variant of it. And even the Joker says that, right? He says, he was a really great guy, but I really needed to test out my fun little toxin on somebody. It's a work in progress, just like me. Best to test it on number 22 before I try it on numero uno. And where Manny kind of like begs and is like, oh, I'm not the leader, man. Commissioner McCloud is the leader. He's the guy you want. The response to the Joker, oh, I know. Like, I know he's the leader, but he's going to jail for a while. But when he gets out, don't worry, I've got plans for him. For right now, it's just you and me. And where Manny thinks the Joker's going to experiment on him, the response to the Joker is, no, I'm not going to experiment on you. You and I are just going to have some fun. And so what you do is you pick up in the bar in the first video that we did, where the Joker basically had the tar beat out of him, right? By like these biker guys, these gangbangers who were super hardcore. And you get this amazing moment because you basically get McCloud being put on trial, the guy's getting 10 years, and they're all kind of talking about how because cops are now going after their own, rooting out crooked cops, they can't be two places at once. So presumably it would make life easier on all the other criminals in the city of Gotham, because while Batman exists, he hasn't reached that level of like folklore, right? Where it's like the bat is out there and he's always watching, right? That kind of in-between ground from when he first shows up and then people realizing what he is, and they just kind of have to keep an eye out for him in case he shows up here. But what happens is the Joker shows up in this place and all the other guys see him and they're like, oh, if it isn't that crappy Joker who we beat the absolute tar out of, right? The guy who just wouldn't stop laughing. They don't take him seriously, right? You know, they're like his big friends spoiled all the fun and everything, but then the Joker in turn closes the door, locks it, and that's it. This guy goes full on a Bronx Tale, right? Now's you can't leave. And the Joker fully becomes the Joker. This is how he becomes that guy. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Let me know what you think about this. I know it might be a little bit divisive, but I will catch you all later. Peace.